Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered, and welcome to everybody watching on YouTube. I'm, of course, your co-host, Menners, and this week I've given Paul the week off, or he put in his leave for the podcast for his free volunteer job, and I granted it. So I just roped in someone who a while ago thought that the internet and T20 cricket would stick around, and I think Jarrod Kimber has been proven right. Jarrod, welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. How are
Thanks
you?
for having me on. Yeah, I'm good, mate.
You're great to have you back on. I think the last time you were on was in early 2019. So we've had World Cups and pandemics since then. But yeah, you're hosting two podcasts at the moment, Red Inca and Double Century. How are they going?
Yeah, they're going really well. I've got Barrett Sundaresan is going to be joining me on Red Inca soon. So it's not just me for the first time ever, which is fun. And Double Century, we've got to the point where the 99.94 network that I co-founded has enough money that we can do Double Century weekly. So before we would do a season of Double Century, and then I would have to spend months and months trying to find time to write all the episodes. And now I've got Abhishek Mukherjee working with me, who's probably the best historian in cricket. And so, it's all going quite well. Like you, really enjoy doing podcasts, and I've been a fan of podcasts for a long time. So it's good to finally do them properly after years of not quite doing them properly with ESPN.
Yeah, it all sounds good, but I just heard that Barrett, are you poaching Barrett from Cricket Unfiltered? So is he contractually restricted from coming back on Cricket Unfiltered now?
No, he's Barrett. He'll
Just
say yes to anything. He'll probably
good,
go
good.
and get your groceries if you need them.
Fantastic.
He's got a couple of. He's a bit like me. He's never he hasn't worked as much in the podcast space as he wanted to. I know he's been on yours and obviously he's been on everyone's podcast, a bit like I have. And I think he just got to a point where he was really interested in getting more involved with podcasts, and he contacted me about some other shows. So I'm helping him make one show, and I said, look, just come on my podcast and we'll talk nonsense once a week. So we I'm hoping to be able to get. I mean, to be honest, he just wants to do probably a wrestling podcast. Yeah, he's probably going to do all this cricket stuff as long as he has to, so he can end up with a wrestling or an MMA show. So I'll help him out on the way towards his actual life goal.
Yeah, and it's just annoying trying to find someone every week as well. So at least you just plug Barrett in, and then you've got someone. We've also got someone else joining us now. For those who sort of watch our social media accounts, there's been some great content lately, and we've got an intern who's been interning on Cricket Unfiltered all years. His name's James. We call him Muggers because his last name is Muggeridge, and Australians do really inventive nicknames, so we call him Muggers. Muggers, welcome to Cricket Unfiltered. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thank you, Menners. Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So,
awesome.
So let's get Muggers. Muggers is going to be coming back at the end of the show. He has actually got a job in podcasting now through his internship at Cricket Unfiltered. So Jaleesa, gets a job on network television. Muggers gets a job as well, but he's still the intern on this show because he hasn't quite, been progressed to the full panelist yet. So Muggers, we'll see if you can't let it go at the end. I know you've got one stored up, and if you can monitor the chat and tweet out all the links, just do your internship, buddy.
Yep, no worries, all good.
Thanks, Muggers. All right, Jarrod, now the adults can talk. So let's get into the cricket news brought to you by Piccolo Podcasts. So did you see much of the Australia-India T20 series? And if so, what did you think?
No, it didn't actually. It wasn't broadcasted on a proper channels in the UK, so trying to watch it my normal way didn't quite work. I mean, obviously, I think from Australian perspective, it's fairly funny that Cameron Green's never actually made any T20 runs before. They throw him up the top of the order, and it's at the very most, it's probably complicated. They're thinking. I haven't talked to any of the selectors at the moment, but I can imagine they're sitting there going, well, what do we do now? Because if we're going to replace one of our openers, it's probably going to be Aaron Finch. And we're, that would be an awkward position to be in just before the World Cup. So I thought the Cameron Green stuff was really funny. Also, goes back to what I've always said, which is basically it's so much easier to open in T20 cricket. And, if you do have a player with talent like him, it's much better off setting him up the top. I even see Nicholas Pooran started doing it, after having a form slump everyone ends up at the top, mate. So I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic. But as far as teams and everything, it's incredible that England are playing 6 games in Pakistan and Australia are playing these games in India before a World Cup in Australia. I wouldn't have thought it's the most ideal practice for the World Cup, but I did look it up today. UAE have never played a T20 game in Australia. They basically hardly ever played T20 games outside. So Australia and England won't be the worst prepared going into the World Cup, at least.
They'll all be badly prepared. I'm actually commentating. Ireland's got 3 warm-up games. They're playing down at Coogee, and I'm commentating on all of them. So maybe Ireland are going to be one of the best prepared teams because they're playing Randwick, the SCG 11, and New South Wales. But with Cameron Green, like, could you sort of, you've spent a lot of time analysing T20 cricket. He does, I guess, when you think about it, have the skill set to open just because the field's up and he just muscles the ball over the top.
Yeah, I think for someone like him, if you watch him in Test cricket, we've seen him hit the ball very hard, but he doesn't do it straight away, right? And if you're that kind of player and you like to think about it and you like to be, he's quite a conservative player, I think, naturally. I think, he's not a very ultra aggressive player. And I think if you have a player like that and they come in the middle order when the field's out and the ball's a little bit soft and the best spinners are bowling, I think there's that natural instinct to knock the ball around a little bit. And then he gets trapped in that. And then he probably plays one big shot and he's gone out a couple of times. And you look at his strike rate. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was around 110, 115. I've seen that before with similar kinds of players. If you're at the top of the innings, all he really needs to do is hit the ball hard, right? The ball's going to come onto the bat harder. He's going to pick the odd gap. And once he's going, he'll feel completely different. So when he hits, if he does get to the point where, although he didn't bat for that long, so he didn't have to worry about the middle overs. But if he does get to the middle overs, he's got a choice then. Either he can start to knock the ball around, but he's going to do that with a good strike rate, or he can continue to go because he's already feeling it and he knows he can clear any boundary. It's just a much easier way of doing it. I remember Brad Hodge telling me once that it was number 4 position is so hard because you generally come in at the end of the power play and you're like, well, we don't want to lose another wicket now because we just lost one. Or you come in just after the power play when everyone's back and the best spinner is usually bowling. There's no perfect place to come in. And number 5 is even, there's so few players in the world who are specialist number 5s because that's an even weirder position because you need this ability to come in and push the tempo almost straight away. And we haven't really built T20 players like that. And then you've got a young test-ready player in Cameron Green, right? Who, has a good technique, gets on top of the ball, plays at a fairly slow strike rate. Throwing him into that, it doesn't matter that he has the power and the eye. He has to work out what his role is. And the interesting thing is, go through Ben Stokes' T20 career. He's never really been an ideal T20 player because he's never quite found a position that suits the way that he wants to play. And you see it with a lot of those all-rounder sort of talents. It took Jason Holder. Jason Holder was in the IPL in 2017 and became a good IPL player, 2 or 3 years, probably last year, if we're being honest. And there's a lot of all-rounders. It's clear that Jason Holder was always going to be a good T20 player, but he couldn't work out how he fit into these structures. And I think Cameron Green just hadn't even played much, right? You throw him up the order and it's really easy. I was at Melbourne Stars when Marcus Stoinis went up the order and he'd been playing in the middle order for a long time. And the minute he went up the order, he was like, oh, all I need to do is play through the line here and I'm going to beat mid-off and mid-on. Right. And if I hit the ball hard on the offside, I'm probably going to get the ball through the ring once or twice. And he ended up with, a decent strike rate opening up. And it was a much easier role for him. If you look at Marcus Stoinis, it's taken him years to work out how to bat lower down the order because it really is a trickier and weirder position. And it's one of the reasons that so many of the West Indians did so well is they all got clumped down the order. Kyron Pollard and Carlos Brathwaite and Bravo and Andre Russell. And they kind of became specialists in that position. And for a long time, they were the only ones. And you had maybe, I don't know,
Dan Christian.
Dan Christian, David Miller. I'm trying to think. There's not that many other non-West Indian sort of specialist, 5, 6, 7 players.
Matt Wade now, the little general.
Yeah. And a perfect example of he failed the first few times he did it. It's not a natural position to bat in, and it's not easy to be able to do that. So I think, with someone like Green, I think he's probably they might end up using him as a number 3 in a perfect situation. But Mitchell Marsh is probably also a perfect number 3. So one of them might end up having to open in that situation. But yeah, it is. It's not ideal, but that's the biggest problem with T20 cricket is essentially everyone is better when they open, and you end up. What was the tournament Australia had where we had? I can't remember which one it was now, 2014 maybe, where we had 6 openers that we took on tour with us, and Aaron Finch had the bat in the middle order. You see that again and again in T20 cricket. Or the best
Warner
players
didn't
end
even
up doing
open.
it.
Warner didn't even open for a T20 World Cup. Remember they tried him somewhere down the order?
Did he bat 3 or 4? Yeah. Well, I was at St. Lucia when David Warner batted 4 for us as well for the same reason. It wasn't that, I remember he came to me before he came and he said, what do you think? And I was like, well, we've got the world's best opener batting at number 4. It's not an ideal situation, but that's how these things happen. And, I think Cameron Green has probably caused some issues, but a lot of his problems are just, I don't think he's played enough T20 cricket, which is maybe good for his overall development. Get a little bit more red ball in his cricket early on. You need that. Still think you need that base knowledge, and I think you could see in someone like Nicholas Pooran, who, to be fair, it wasn't his fault he didn't play red ball cricket, but I could see in his development he's probably now having to work out his game at the T20 level without that base that every other player has from struggling through in first class cricket.
He's shown a bit in domestic 50 over cricket, Green, a couple of big scores, and he opened up towards the end. The Australian selectors have added Cameron Green. Well, they've added him to the World Cup squad. They've made the World Cup squad now 16, and basically this is a build up to the World Cup. There's a few injuries around, and I actually think the selectors are hoping one of the players doesn't come up and they can swap Green in. But do you think, Jarrod, that Aaron Finch is actually in the top 6 best batters in T20 cricket for Australia right now?
He probably, well, I mean, if you believe in form, then no. If you believe in talent, he probably is in that top 6. But whether he's tipped over the other side, we've seen him struggle for a long time now. He's certainly not the player he once was. I don't think even Finchy would disagree with you there. But this is what happens when, you give the captaincy to someone. We saw Owen Morgan go through. Yeah, I still think that Owen Morgan will probably play in a tournament, in the next little while and smash the ball everywhere. But England, at a certain point, they had to have a chat to him and just go, what are we doing here? We have better players than you. And Aaron Finch is now in the same position. And it's an awkward place to be. But also, I'm not sure that they want to make a change as close to the World Cup. England probably made their change, or England and West Indies probably made their changes just long enough away, to be able to allow for it. It would be very hard, I think, for Australia to go in with a different captain at this point. But having said that, I think as if you factor everything in, it would be, I think Aaron Finch only, if he gets in that top 6 players, he's probably still, the 6th or 7th best one. And he's probably certainly not in the top, 4 best opening options that they could find right at the moment. So from that perspective, he's quite easily replaced. And that is a huge, huge problem for them. But because he's Finch, he might only need 2 or 3 innings. He still makes a big impact in that World Cup.
Where are you on Steve Smith in the T20 side? We argue about this all the time, and I think I'm starting to just come to the realization that Smith's rhythm actually doesn't suit modern T20 cricket. Maybe 5-6 years ago it was okay, but his rhythm suits 50 over and Test cricket, and actually they should probably, just like a Rolls-Royce, park him now for the T20 games.
So it was a really funny moment. I made a video a couple of years ago about batting at number 4. I can't remember if I made it for Cricket Info or if it was for my YouTube, wherever it was. And someone in the Australian camp said, we're going to show this to Smudge because we've been trying to get him to bat number 4. A lot of it was he wanted to continue to bat at number 3 because he saw himself as a number 3. That's unquestionably not where he should bat in that team, right? If you're going to use him, the only way to use him is to say to him, and you could make this claim for Kane Williamson, and there's a few other guys out there that could play this role, which is if we get to a position when we lose 2 or 3 quick early wickets, obviously we want Steve Smith to come in. right? If we don't have that position or the pitch is playing absolutely flat, there are going to be times when we don't want you to come in at all until number 7 or number 8. And it's not that we don't think you're good. It's just that we're trying to maximize the strike rate all the way through on a good pitch. And he's not going to do that. We've seen that with Kane Williamson. You argue Virat Kohli and Baba Azam. They're almost two perfect batting machines, right? They can't think about T20 cricket the way that they need to. And we know that Virat Kohli, Steve Smith, even Kane Williamson, I remember I did a study once they get to the death and they actually release themselves, their strike rates go through the roof. Really high strike rates, way above other guys.
But I don't think Smith looks good when he tries to smash it. Like
he does it. He's not set up for it.
Every now and then he hits one. Like he hit a beauty. He can flick them really well onto the outside, but he looks ungainly trying to muscle the ball.
To be fair, he looks ungainly most of his shots.
Maybe.
But you're right. I don't think it comes natural to those players. But I think that was the role that I think the Australian, I can't remember when that was. Must have been 3 or 4 years ago now. No, actually, it was just before the last World Cup, perhaps. They knew that if he was going to work, he had to bat at number 4. He obviously fought that a lot. They eventually got him to number 4 through the Mitch Marsh accident. Do you remember Mitch Marsh ends up batting at number 3? Almost entirely by accident. I don't think he was in the World Cup plan, certainly not in the starting 11 plan. And suddenly, everything fell into place for them to win that World Cup.
Well, he went on the tour when no one else would go, didn't he, to the West Indies and Bangladesh?
West Indies one, yeah. And then he was throwing up the order again, as you said, because no one was there. So
they were like, well, we've got to pick him now.
Yeah. And so, I think what they've tried to do with Steve Smith is say, we don't always need you. That's the only reason you can pick him. And this is, I'm on record of saying that he's probably, at his best, the best player in Test cricket we've seen since Bradman, the consistency to score runs at that level.
100%.
I think he's a freak of nature. I think he should be studied by scientists to work out why he's worked out a better method than other players. That said, in T20 cricket, it's almost a completely different sport.
It is. And like in 50 over cricket, he can score 100 off 62 balls back-to-back days at the SCG, but he can't do that in T20 cricket. And I think just accept it. So I'll give you a lineup. Like if my top 7 was for the World Cup, Cameron Green, David Warner, Mitch Marsh, Glenn Maxwell, Tim David, and then you've got Stoinis or Inglis, and then Matt Wade. That's a really powerful top 7. Yeah. You don't need Finch. You don't need Smith.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I would change the order slightly on that. But other than that, I think it's stronger. You got Maxwell at 4 and David at 5. That's my only concern. So the problem with that lineup is it is probably the best way of ensuring that you have a quality T20 hitters all the way through, right? But you have to be really flexible with that lineup. And if they come to a situation where Shaheen Afridi is bowling in the middle overs and is on top, and Australia are 2 wickets down, or you've got Maxwell, who's not particularly going to want to be great at that, and Tim David and Marcus Stoinis, and even Matthew Wade, they're all really good players, but they're all players who probably are capped at a certain level, right, as far as batting talent, against top level bowling. We've seen Maxwell's outstanding and can destroy players, but I think at that sort of level, all of those guys are a little bit weak, which is why none of them have gone on to be great Test players, right? And in Tim David's case, we don't even know, but I would assume he wouldn't be able to do that either. But if you're looking at the ability to score absolutely huge amount of runs, and you're hoping in that as well that Green and Warner, who are the Test players, if one of them sticks around, then that's a little bit different. But yeah, it's a problem when trying to think of a team. England don't have Jofra at the moment. Shaheen Afridi probably won't bowl that much. But if Bumrah comes back on for 2 overs in the middle, right, or Rabada comes on for 2 overs in the middle to try and get a wicket, I think that team is susceptible to that. But if you're telling me what that team has is a much higher top end, right? The ability to score 180, 190, 200, and then occasionally kick on well beyond that, which other teams aren't even going to be able to get close to. That's why that's a much better lineup. If you want to have the insurance of Smith in there, then you have to look at another way. But that, for me, is a much better T20 lineup than what we have, what they're trying to do, and what they've been trying to do for quite a long time.
Well, glad you're on board. Now, what about the bowling attack? So I think for Australia, it's pretty easy. Adam Zampa, Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, probably the locks in that bowling lineup. But then it gets a bit murky because when you add Pat Cummins in there, then all of a sudden Hazlewood and Cummins are a bit samey. And Cummins has got a bit of tap in the IPL, but also he can win you a match if he has a good night. So where are you on Pat Cummins as a T20 bowler?
I think most of Pat Cummins' problems are that he's bowling the wrong overs. And I actually think that when he's matched up with Hazlewood, it should, in theory, allow for him to bowl in his best spot. So Kolkata have tried him as an opening bowler, and I'm trying to remember back to when he played for the Thunder. I think I came up with that theory very early on, that his role is that Liam Plunkett type role, right? So Liam Plunkett, I suppose Mark Wood has done it a little bit of recent times. You see, what's the quick bowler that plays for the Sunrisers? He does it now as well, which is basically having one very fast bowler bowling in the middle, because that stops the other teams being able to do what we just talked about. You can't have Glenn Maxwell and Tim David and all those sorts of guys facing a 90-mile-an-hour bowler in the middle overs. That's not what they're there for, right? That's not what you want them to be facing. Certainly not when they first come to the crease. So if you can get one over out of Starc at the top, and you then have Hazlewood bowling probably 2 to 3 at the top, you should be able to push Cummins into that middle section, and then you can match Cummins and Zampa, and that's a really good matchup throughout the middle. Throw in where they throw their fifth bowler is, they won the last World Cup. Doing this, they might win another one, but it's obvious that, I think Matthew Wade said it in a press conference the other day, we just take a gamble with our fifth bowler, right? So how you match all that around, that's the problem with Cummins, right? If you have a strong fifth bowler, which is he would have had when he was at the Thunder, he would have had Andre Russell quite often as the fifth bowler. He would have, I think they had a couple of other options around them. That's when Cummins can be your fourth bowler without any problems, because your fifth bowler is still really strong. In this particular case, it gets a little bit more risky because Cummins is going to have to bowl probably 1 to 2 overs up at the top. And then he's going to have to bowl another death over probably as well. And I don't think he's as good at that. So whether you can get stealing over out of Stoinis or Mitch Marsh or Glenn Maxwell in the power play, that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, he's so, I don't think you can not have him in the team because he's Pat Cummins. And no, I don't think there's a better replacement, even if there might be a replacement who fits into the team better, if that makes sense. And also,
we had a listener suggest Kane Richardson.
I think
who had a good 100.
I think we've seen him over and over again at the international level, and I'm not sure. Every time I've seen, I'm a big fan of him, and I think he's an undervalued franchise player. I think he should have played more franchise cricket. But I think the reason he hasn't, almost every time we've seen him play for Australia, I think the Australian team doesn't look as strong. Right. The other thing with Cummins is we know he can only smash fast bowling, but he can come in at number 8. And if you've got him at number 8 and Mitch Starc at number 9, you can use Mitch Starc earlier on if you want as a pinch hitter, and you can hold Cummins all the way back to the last 3 or 4 overs. It's hilarious when you look at his strike rate. I think it's something like he's got a strike rate of 160 against pace bowling and a strike rate of less than 100 against spin bowling. He is one of the world's best, most consistent hitters of pace bowling, back Cummins. I'm not sure, Kane Richardson is a handy batter, but he's not going to give you that kind of impact at the end. Just taking Cummins out, I massively worry about. The other thing I would say is that Kookaburra, I've just done a video on this today, but Kookaburra have clearly changed the ball, and the seam is 100% reinforced. On Australian pitches, Pat Cummins bowling wobble balls up the top of the innings and then coming back and bowling cross seam should be more effective than we have seen him in the IPL over the last, or in the UAE. It should be much more.
He was effective doing that for the Thunder, but I think it was 3 or 4 Big Bash seasons ago, maybe 4.
It's part of the problem as well. These Australian players. So if you look at Hazlewood 100% got good at T20 cricket by accident, right?
Yeah,
Australia
absolutely.
went out of their way to stop him playing. Didn't pick him for that 2019 World Cup, which was the obvious time. And I think they look like doofuses for that now, other than the fact that we didn't win that World Cup. He's gone on to be one of the best white ball bowlers in the world. And there's no reason why he shouldn't be. He's not like Vernon Philander. He's quicker and he's taller. So it's harder to line him up. And he had to basically play a season on his own to work it out. We saw Peter Siddle for the Strikers do a very similar thing, right? No one really wanted him in the Big Bash, worked it out on his own. My worry for Cummins, and you can say this for Stark as well. Stark should still be one of the best T20 bowlers in the world, or white ball bowlers in the world. They don't bowl enough of it. They don't get in the pattern of it. And then they end up at the IPL in Cummins' place, playing out of position. They had to fit him in. Cummins is, Kolkata, they were just as badly shaped as the Australian team was. They didn't have the really good solid 11, and so they had to use him out of position. And this is a problem. A lot of the other players around, Shaheen Afridi knows exactly what he's going to do for this World Cup. Right? Harris Ralph knows exactly what he's going to do. Where, Australia is still doing that thing of, we've got so much talent, we'll work it out on the day. Other teams aren't doing that as much. And it means that you are very right to go, maybe it is Cam Richardson, right? And you look at his record and it makes sense. I just know that if we get Pat Cummins' treatment correct, he's a much better, stronger fourth bowler than Cam Richardson is ever going to be. But Cam Richardson might be the better fit at the moment. So it's an awkward situation for them to be in.
I think I'm with you. I think Pat Cummins is probably worth putting your faith in. I famously said before the last T20 World Cup that Australia couldn't win it. And I'm kind of annoyed because I think they kind of fluked it, and now it kind of just sort of fed into this. We can just turn up and put our best team together and we'll win it.
I've got a friend who works, quite high up, and he was massively happy that they won, obviously, because he was part of that win and was excited by it. But he did say, "Will we learn now? Will we learn that we shouldn't do this?" And if you look at it, you would have to say, looking at that tournament back, that probably Pakistan and England were the two best teams, and neither of them made the final. And that happens in T20 cricket. It's, the IPL has that great, rugby league, Aussie rules preliminary final set up so that the best teams get a second shot. And we don't have that in the World Cup. We're just like, good luck. And obviously the toss played a huge role in that. And if Marcus Stoinis gets caught at deep mid-wicket off Shadab Khan, and I think he beat him by a foot and a half over his head. It wasn't Imad Wasim, whoever it was, he was slogging across the line. We bum out in the semi-finals, right? And there's no way we would have won that game just with Matthew Wade out there on his own. So I think you're right. I think it was probably the luckiest win that we've had in modern T20 cricket at a World Cup. Probably some of the early ones were a little bit like that. And my worry is that there is a lot that still needs to be done within the Australian setup to make them consistently good. And the talent's never going to be a problem. I shouldn't say never. The talent doesn't seem to be a problem, even when we went through our down run, that sort of 2009 to 2014 era. There's still incredible talent coming through, even if we didn't
mainly from New South Wales, mainly from the great state of New South Wales.
Yeah, I mean, New South Wales has been carrying
first-class cricketers.
Yeah, New South Wales have been carrying Australia for a while. I mean, the whole Victoria thing's really interesting, right? That they are still more there are still more people who play cricket in Victoria than New South Wales, and it doesn't seem to produce the talent that it should do. So there's obviously a pipeline problem there. But just in general, like the ability to you can't just rely on talent, because eventually India and Pakistan are going to work it out. England have been much better at the way they have worked out their systems over the last couple of years. They've got more players in England than we have in Australia. At a certain point, we're going to have to not just produce great talent, but work out how to actually shepherd it and make the most out of it. And we've done that before. That's how we ruled cricket from 95 through to 2007. So we were ahead of the game once when it comes to thinking about cricket in terms of being professional. There's no reason not to go back to that.
Interesting. So I think if they go down the avenue of maybe a specialist T20 captain, and just make it its own little entity and not worry about who's in the other teams. Like if Smith wasn't such a good player in the Test and ODIs, and you just looked at his T20 stats, you just wouldn't pick him, like especially the last 2 years. So anyway, we've got to move on. A couple of quick questions for you. Who would you make the next 50 over skipper for the Australian men's side?
It's a great question. I think I was asked this on my podcast recently. I'm not sure I have.
You don't have to keep dropping the plugs in for all your other stuff, Jarrod. Okay.
No, it's
we
Red
get
Anchor.
it.
It's
We get
called
it.
Manners. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but
I
no,
have.
I think I was asked this on a show, and I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember back if I had a good answer.
I think they'll go for Carey. I'll give you something to go off. I think they'll go for Carey because I think this is the least imaginative option. He's the vice captain. They like him. He's in the team. They don't have to worry about Smith and Warner and all that drama.
Yeah,
It's
I
just,
mean, the Warner
here you
thing
go.
is interesting, isn't it? I mean, even Warner is surely getting to the end of his career of playing one-day cricket. So even if you got through the political minefield and the PR minefield of that, I'm not sure that's a great decision. If you pick Carey, I think what you are saying is we don't have anyone, right? And I'm not sure
I think
that's
what
wrong.
they'll do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's wrong because I'm not sure they do have anyone, and we saw that with Payne at a certain point. So, I mean, Australia only picks wicket keepers in case of emergency. I'm not sure that Carey is the best wicket keeping white ball option. I'm not. Carey's a really interesting cricketer. He's had a really, really good international career based on a couple of interesting seasons with Adelaide Strikers. And I'm not sure we've ever got the most out of him at international level. Making him captain, I worry about making him captain because, does his form completely hold up? Or he's played some really good innings, at times as well. I wonder if his overall form really holds up. But if it's probably the safest option. The other problem is that Cummins makes the most sense probably in one-day cricket, and you can't play him because they never play, right?
He doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, even if he wanted to do it, it wouldn't matter because they spend all their time resting him from those tournaments. So they've basically set up a system where it can't be a bowler. So he's the most obvious one. And then I suppose is Travis Head? I mean, Travis Head was once a Test vice captain, Manners.
I know.
We assume he's no longer the Test vice captain, but I don't think there's ever been an official announcement that he's no longer the Test vice captain. He just wasn't.
There's still six of them.
Yeah. So I suppose Head is the other one that they would be thinking
a good call.
about. But you run into the same problems with Head of, is he automatically good enough to be in that side? And is he consistent enough? The problem with Head is very similar. A lot of Head's international cricket was thrown at him after playing that phenomenal innings. What was 170 odd that he made, all those years back. I'm not sure that him and Carey have shown that they are consistent top-level international players. When you make one of those players a captain, we see again and again the sort of pressure that they have to go through if their form drops even slightly. Because if you're averaging 45 in one-day cricket and your form drops, you might be averaging 35. But if you're averaging 30 or 35 and you drop, you're averaging 25. We even saw it with Finch, right? So I do really worry about that situation. Having said that, I have absolutely no name that I could give to you other than, I don't know, Glenn Maxwell, because it'd be fun. And he's a very good captain.
That would be fun. Yeah, his form hasn't been that good either in the 50
Exactly.
overs. So with Carey, he's an interesting one because I've actually, commentated a lot on him, interviewed him a lot. And I actually think I sometimes undervalue him because I think he's actually and we've seen it in his performances at Test and international one-day cricket. He's a sort of meaty player. I think he's got substance and tenacity, which I think are good qualities. But like you, I think someone like Josh Inglis maybe in 3 years will be a better player. So, but I think this will fit them nicely. They could slot Cummins into the Test side. They have Carey run the 50 over. They'll find someone for the T20 side, and they'll just see how the next year or two goes and hope someone like a Head or a Labuschagne really nails down their spots and they can think about them.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Inglis thing is that I think they're desperate to get Inglis involved, right? And yet they haven't quite worked out how to get him into T20 cricket. Will he be better than Carey in one-day cricket? I'm not sure. But I also think that if he gets into T20 cricket, he'll look so good that they'll be like, maybe we should use him in the one-day team.
Yeah.
Because I'm
very enamored by Inglis.
And the way I wanted him in the last World Cup squad. I thought that was in the team, I should say, not even just in the squad. I've been a big fan for a long time, and that's my worry with Carey. And we do that in Australia sometimes as well. In fact, that's kind of how Carey came in. You think about it, he's a T20 player who we now don't use in T20, but that's how he broke into the team. So we do, it has happened before. But I think all things considered, he's 31. I love the fact that he's been a professional in two different sports.
He would really be from Victoria.
Hey?
You would from Victoria, and it's so cringy. The worst thing is every press conference he does, there's always one journo who just has to throw in the token AFL question so that
I
they've got
think,
something to lead the Herald Sun the next day.
yeah, I think. Well, that's all news is local, mate. But I do. What I like about that is that he's man-made. You have to remake your career at that point, right? And there's something to be said for the athletes who don't come through the system. They are a little bit more reliant, and they do have to work it out on their own.
Mm.
And so even if he played, I know, a silly sport like rugby league, I still think there's something to be said for someone having that dual professional system behind them. So I think there's a lot to like of him. But as I said, I just think that if they do it, they're saying that they don't really have a captain, and they don't. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if there was someone obvious, right?
Exactly. I mean, the plan was always Finch was going to try his best to get to the 2023 50 over World Cup, and it didn't happen. So they've got to rethink it. So we're looking for a men's captain. What about in the women's Australian team? Meg Lanning is continuing her break from cricket and could go on for a while. So they will need a captain for 50 over and 20 over cricket and maybe test cricket for the summer. Who do you sort of think from the Australian setup you'd do for the 50 over team?
She's probably too loose a unit, but I'd love it to go to Megan Shute.
Interesting.
I think she's really intelligent. And I think she thinks about cricket in a really interesting way.
I don't know how much international cricket she's going to play though going forward.
Well, that's another interesting part of it. Also, can Australia handle having two fast bowling captains at the same time? Where
well, it could be two keeping captains. Like Alyssa Healy might be the best option. She's
an interesting one as well. I almost feel that both of them are. The problem with them is probably more the social media side of them, if you know what I mean. They're both, loose units. There's a reason Mitchell Marsh doesn't have a Twitter account anymore, right? Like, that's not an accident. He used to have a Twitter account.
Josh Inglis also has that problem. I don't know if you saw that post last summer where he blasted the WA Premier.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think that Alyssa and, both of them, I think are just a little bit like that. I think Alyssa fits the sort of the standard Australian model, which is you give it to the best batter, right? And she's not going anywhere, is she? I don't think I've ever been massively enamored with her tactical nous, but I don't think I was with Lanning's either. I don't think I ever thought of them in that particular way. I suppose at a certain point, mate, where you could make a sock puppet the captain of that team, and it's probably still going to win around 70 to 80% of its games just because it's so good. So maybe we're overthinking that, and Alyssa just gets the job because she's the best batter, and also. I don't see her, if Meg comes back, I don't see any issues with her giving the job back. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to give it to a Michael Clark like figure, right? Who
wants
it's mine now. You're not going to get it back. So I think from that perspective, it does make a little bit more sense to probably give it to someone like Alyssa. Although maybe I'm misunderstanding it, and she has always had these big dreams. But I don't see her as someone who has dreamed of being an Australian leader and being desperate to be one.
Yeah, same. I think she'll just have a good time. Like when she captains New South Wales, I think she's popular and she's lighthearted and fun. So for those listening, news: Meg Lanning will miss the WBBL. Her rest will continue. Dan Brettig reports there is no guarantee she will ever return to international cricket. And I've sort of interviewed Meg a few times, and and I think she's going through a real thing now where she's been in the cricket bubble for a long time, and she's actually wants to go, okay, what does it look like when you're not in the cricket bubble? What does life look like, and what makes me happy? And I just wish her all the best doing that. And if she comes back, great. If she decides she's not going to, that's fine. But if she comes back and she's found that, then she could just be a monster with the bat, because I think towards the end you could tell it was getting her down.
Yeah, she's, for me, one of the most cricket-led people I've ever come across. Her entire existence felt like it was about cricket at times. And we saw that with Steve Smith, and we saw that with Jonathan Trott. It buries you at a certain point. And I've interviewed her, I probably interviewed her a couple of times, but I had a one-on-one with her once. I really felt like there wasn't much to her outside the game, right? I'm not saying she didn't have a hobby or two, but in the same way that Steve Smith really struggled to turn off. And I think that in international cricket now, those sorts of people become hyper successful and then they hit a wall. And I remember talking to someone, I can't remember if it was a fellow journalist or someone, a fellow player, and they were saying that over the last 2 years, and this would have been about a year ago, I would have thought, she had started to work out who she was as a person.
Yeah.
And when you work out who you are as a person, and then you're stuck in and the way that she plays cricket doesn't work with her discovering life, if that makes sense, because a bit like Jonathan Trott, they had to be all in the way that they went about it, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if she, it's almost not broken her is the wrong word, but she hit a wall. And as she started to be like, well, who is Meg Lanning, the person? Because she's still young. She's so young, right? And she's been hyper success. Like if she retired now, she's probably still the best batter in women's cricket history, right? That's how ridiculous her career is. And she could play for another 7 years as well. That's the
incredible.
That's how full on it has been for her so far. So I do think she came to that sort of point. I remember I've talked to a couple of cricketers, international cricketers over the last couple of years, and they say that period between 28 and 32 is really, really interesting. You get a lot of players who at 28 suddenly go, oh God, I might be retired in 2 years. I now need to take my cricket seriously. And you get other people who get to about 28 and just be like, there's got to be more than staying at the Radisson.
Because don't you think it's these players that they spend the whole, as you say, up to the 28, just wanting to be good at cricket, and that's what makes them happy. And then they get to 28, and it doesn't make them happy in the same way anymore, and they go, "Fuck."
Yep, I remember talking to, it must have been Trent Woodhill, and he said we were talking about winning, and he's like, "You have a great night, right? You win, you have a great night. Everyone's over the moon." And he said, then the next day, you start thinking about the next win, right? It doesn't fill you the way that you think it should. And it does end a lot quicker. And when you're a professional athlete, if you win a club trophy, in club cricket, you've got 6 months, right, before you play that next one. It doesn't work that way in international cricket. They're much better at losing than amateurs are because they're used to losing far more. But when they win, they don't get the same heights that sometimes an amateur would, because they're like, okay, I've won. I've got 2 months. Okay. And then in that 2 months' time, I've got to start preparing for that tournament. And I think you realize, I think this comes back to, I think there's a line in Cool Runnings Manners where he says, you're not, I think the John Candy character says something along the lines is, if you're not enough before, you're not enough when you win. Right. And that at the time, that's a really great line in a Disney movie. And I never got it. Having worked in professional sport, I really get that now, that if you aren't a fully functioning person, you can be the most successful cricketer of your generation and you still don't feel like you're fully whole. And I'm making a lot of guesses on Meg, but I don't think she's ever felt completely comfortable in her skin as a star. And with the bat in her hand, could not be more comfortable. As a role model, off the field, all those sorts of things, I don't think she's ever quite felt comfortable. And hopefully, if she needs to take 2, 3, 4 years off and discover who she is as a person, while still being able to make some good money and maybe appearing at the odd franchise tournament and appearing at Fair Break or whatever she needs to do to keep her finances rolling, she could still come back and have a really good career. The other thing I would say, mate, is just if you follow women's tennis, women's athletes develop so much quicker than men's athletes. So by the time they're 15, they're already kind of fully formed as far as, physically. And so that, the Martina Hingis, the Serena Williams, Jennifer Capriati, quite often in the old days, they would retire in their 20s because they'd already conquered everything. We've never had that in women's cricket because we've never really had a position where women could retire. They either just faded away because there was nothing holding them to the game and they had to go pay their mortgage, which happened a lot, sadly. Now we're in a position where you can actually make a fair bit of money, right? And if you can decide to pull back from that, and we're seeing Lizelle Lees, and Stefani Taylor go, don't need to play international cricket anymore. I can actually pick and choose what I want. And the really interesting thing, I talked to Sean Martin from Fairbreak, and he was saying that when they want to, you know, in an ideal situation, they want the fair break women's tournament to be longer because, of course, you do. That's how you make your money. But the women playing it are like 2 weeks is great, right? Because they think about it from a completely different way than men do. Men just leave and the family's at home on their own. The women probably want to take their families with them more often, or if they go away, 2 weeks is probably more often, more that manageable term. So women think about professional sport in such a different way to men. And I think it's probably this last year of Nat Siva, Lizelle Lee, Stefani Taylor, and Meg Lanning. You're talking about 4 of the best players in the world who have all made career-altering decisions. We had that before. We had Claire Taylor retire from England when she was about 30 or 31. But she did it to go and get a job because she had to pay her bills, right? You know, now they're making professional thought, and it's really interesting. And that's one reason that women not being involved in sport is a massive problem for the men's game. Is women really think about these things in a massively different way, and I think we're starting to see that through the international game.
Yeah, agree. And look, I think with Meg and other cricketers that do go through that, you see, I guess, in the men's game, someone like, I guess, an Usman Khawaja who went through that difficult period and comes out the other side, and then you can really prosper when you sort of got your balance and your life sort of that stuff in order. So, you know, fingers crossed she does come back. Staying on women's cricket. So I think 2 things significant happened. I think it was significant that India smashed England 3-0 in a 50-over series on English soil. I think that's really good for the sort of trajectory of that Indian team. But everyone's talking about the run out at the non-strikers end of Charlie Dean by Deepti Sharma.
Deepti Sharma.
Yeah. Now, everyone's weighed in on it, Jarrod. So just give it to me like quickly. What do you think of that run out?
I think if you don't want to be run out, you shouldn't leave your crease, Menace.
I agree. See, we're in the same space. Like, I just think I understand what all the furor is about. Like, I think, like, if you don't mind,
I can tell you why this happened. It's really interesting. Those runouts had existed for a long time, right? They weren't new. They had existed. I think the first recorded one is 1834 or 1835, right? We're not talking about something that only came when professionalism came or anything like that. In the 1950s, there was certainly a sweep back to romantic times. Oh, we're missing the amateur days. England pushed that, right? And they really wanted to go back to how cricket felt between 1890 and 1910. Now, it's all a lie, as almost all those things always are, right? The Australian cricket team went on strike in that period. If you want to talk about money, W.G. Grace, if he didn't fix games, Manners, he was certainly involved in shady deals when it came to certain cricket games that don't make sense. He also, as an amateur, was the highest paid cricketer in the world. So he's a complete charlatan as an amateur. So when you just start to dig into that era, yes, you have Victor Trumper. What a pure spirit. But Victor Trumper still didn't go on a tour with Australia because of money reasons, right? And what you have is it's like that sweep back to the better times. It's like how, you know, country music is actually written the majority of times by people in the city who grew up on a farm or their families from a farm, right? They're not. And it's that whole sweep back to a thing that never really existed. It's why the whole conservative movement is what it is, right? Oh, we have to get back to the good old days. Wait a minute. These don't look like good old days. And so
you say the run out. So why is that though a good thing though?
No. So it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing for society. And so what happens in the 1950s is that this spirit of cricket thing becomes very big, right? Before that, W.G. Grace ran out, I think it was Sammy Jones in a test match. When Sammy Jones was hit on the pad, the ball dribbled out on the leg side, right? W.G. Grace walks very slowly over to pick up the ball. Sammy Jones looks at him, nods. He believes that W.G. nods back at him. Sammy Jones goes up to guard in the wicket. W.G. picks up the ball, takes the bails off and runs him out, right? This is a guy who has gates at Lords, right? That's how ruthless he was as a cricketer. You think he wouldn't have tried to run someone out at the non-strikers end when he was bowling, right? He would have tried everything. He did every kind of cheating under that, right? But when we look back at it, he's a lovely guy with a beard. 1950s is this period where they basically tried to inject it with this. They tried to, especially through English cricket, tried to inject it with this idea of, we need to get back to the good old days when amateurs played and gentlemen played and all this sort of stuff. And what it really does is it damages cricket massively. And that happens to be when Vinu Mankad is playing against Bill Brown, right? Vinu Mankad sees Bill Brown, who was the best runner between the wickets in the world at that point. And that's an important fact to know. Part of the reason he was the best runner between wickets in the world is we now know he was getting head starts, right? And so Vinu Mankad notices this, runs him out 1 week in a tour match, and then runs him out in a test match after that, right? A week or so later. What does Bill Brown say, Menace? He says, that's fair enough. I was out of my crease. The controversy isn't made by Bill Brown because he understands that he was getting an advantage and he probably needed someone to yank him back. But the spirit of the game nonsense, and then the idea that you have to warn someone comes in at that point, and it had never been in cricket before. If you don't want to be run out, don't leave your crease. If you're Ian Bell and you think that ball's gone for 4 and you've made a decision before the umpire has called for, don't leave your crease until you are sure. Right. And we see it again and again. We see Murali get run out by the New Zealanders because he goes down to shake Kumar Sangakkara's hand. You could talk about genuine nature of cricket and all these sorts of things. If you don't want to be dismissed, don't leave your crease. And that's as simple as that should be. And also, the batters should not be getting an advantage, whether it's on purpose, whether it's by accident. They should not be getting an advantage. And if they do try and take that advantage, they should be run out the same way in every other part of cricket. They would be penalised in that way. So,
but these same idiots in Lords, these same idiots blowing up, are they? What annoys me, Jarrod, is these muppets that complain about it, and then they'll watch a replay of a bowler getting no balled by like half a centimeter. Okay, and that's a no ball, and it could be cost him a wicket and all that stuff. So that like half a millimeter matters then. But then when the batsman just wants to wander down the crease because you're not watching the ball, oh no, that's against the spirit. It's cogs. What game are they watching? Like maybe in the 50s without TV, I can get it a bit more, but now I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it doesn't make any sense to not penalize a batter for being out of their crease, right? Because we do it in every other way. We have laws that tell you when the ball is live and when the ball is dead. And, you know, as we've seen with this new zombie ball in T20 cricket and one-day cricket, it can get a little bit tricky with that particular ruling. But we do. Batters know that once that bowler is into their run, that ball is live. You stay in your crease until you have to. And you know, I don't know if you ever played indoor cricket, but in indoor cricket, it's the most common form of dismissal in indoor cricket that you can come across. And I think it's very baffling. But I do think a lot of it is through that. But you do see this new generation of fans who think a lot more like us, and they're just like, wait a minute. Why should the batter get away from making a mistake? In any other position, if the batter makes a mistake, we penalize them. And suddenly in this one, we give them an extra chance. No, stay behind the line. That's why there's a line there.
Good. I'm glad you're with me on that. And I think the Indian players were treated pretty unfairly with the backlash. Yeah, it just wasn't. It was, if you ask me, the way the English supporters reacted in the media was against the spirit of cricket. So all them crying on from the BBC, oh, I can't believe what I just saw. I mean, grow up. I mean, God, like it was pathetic.
No, I mean, as much as anything.
I don't want to name them because I don't know which ones I heard doing it, but they were pathetic.
I think I'm going to save the rest because I'm going to do it for your segment at the end. But
okay,
I've got another take on it as well for you.
Okay, good. Now, here's a question from Max Harris, a listener. Now that we have the technology, so they check the no balls, can't they check the batter at the same time and go, okay, that's a short run if you leave early?
Yeah, I have heard about that. You got to remember that it's really. I think we probably need to check wides first. So what they would probably do next is we will check no balls, then we will check wides. We're getting to the point where the ICC don't have a lot of money for that sort of thing. Do you remember we spent 5 years in a position where umpires were told internationally not to call no balls in test matches, right? On the down low, because it saved the embarrassment of what happened with Adam Voges, right? And so we've just got to the point where the ICC has ponied up the money to call the no balls. It will cost more money and more time for them to check the wides and the other things. It would also might delay the game. But there's a fair point. I think eventually we should have two. Part of the problem at the moment is they're sending these umpires around the world. The third umpire doesn't need to travel around the world. The third umpire should be in a van permanently, and they should be
bunker.
in a bunker. They should be specialists. if you do that, you can actually have a third umpire, a fourth umpire, one of which is looking at all, all those other things. So one just focuses on no balls and then does DRS. The other one looks at wides and one short and players. The other one that we don't talk about much is players sometimes in the circle aren't in the circle when the ball is bowled. In T20 and one-day games, they either take a step back or whatever, and it's almost never called because how would the umpire be able to call? I think Dirk Nannes is one of the few players I've ever seen called where he took a couple of steps back once. So yeah, there's a lot of little things like that. And the other one that I would throw in is back foot no balls. Bowlers are getting wider and wider on the crease because the wobble ball allows you to bowl wider, and we don't even check it when we check a no ball, and it's another form of no ball. So I think there's a lot of things like that that should be checked automatically, and the height of full tosses should be checked automatically. If it's noticeably above knee height, we should be checking the height of no balls. We shouldn't be waiting for that square leg umpire.
Yeah, I think they're really tough ones. The height of no ball, the full tosses, because of, I just think they're hard because if the batsman goes, they say it's got to be in the batsman's standing position, but they sort of need to mark that on the screen.
Well, that's what I mean. So that's why you do it. That's why the umpire in the field is never in a good position because he's watching the batter in this position. Yeah. Whereas actually at the start of that ball, when the batter is fully upright and their legs
they could
straight,
just mark it on the screen.
You mark it then. That's why. So that's why for me, it should be. Look, I've just done a big video on the fact that Kookaburra changed the balls and the ICC don't seem to have known or be aware of it, right? The ICC is not in charge of any of this sort of stuff. Talking to people within the ICC and some cricket boards, the actual control of what happens on the ground is really bad in cricket. It's not regulated properly. The cricket committee sadly get together and they don't understand that other sports are completely controlling the product on the ground and we're not. What we have just said, almost everything we've just said from your comment all the way through to that mark is stuff that people at the ICC and major cricket boards have thought about before. And when they try and have those meetings, it just goes nowhere. They know, right? Cricket should own the Kookaburra ball. Baseball owns its ball, right? It co-bought rulings. If Kookaburra is now used in 89% of international deliveries, and it's only going to go up as more teams play international cricket, if that's the state, then we should own that ball and control it and know exactly why we are changing it and when we are changing it. It shouldn't be down to a small family company from Melbourne who also does footy, tennis, and hockey.
Yeah, and if the ICC did do that, then they could do something like juice the balls for the T20 World Cup.
They would.
And we get like scores of like 280 versus 270, and everyone's talking about cricket.
Then we'd have a new conspiracy, which, would go in a different direction.
Juiced cricket balls, like in baseball. All right, I've got a couple of questions here, then we'll get on to Can't Let It Go. Stephen Matlock. Hey, Jarrod, thoughts on Test cricket's future? Now, Matlock, Stephen, how long do you think we've got? I mean, Jarrod could be here for hours. But I guess answer this. Do we need a Death of the Gentleman Part 2?
I certainly won't be making it.
Okay. Your filmmaking days are gone.
Oh, well, I mean, I would certainly make more films. I'm not sure if I'd ever go back to that world. That film took a long time. What I would say is that we're in a situation now where Test cricket needs to be separate to the running of the rest of the game. They had their chance to make it into a proper league. And by that, I don't just mean calling a World Test Championship. I mean selling the league as a league, making the ICC run it, having the TV rights pay the players, having that TV rights pay the ground costs. They didn't do it because the smaller teams were afraid of being relegated to the second division. And so now their next big chance of anything is probably almost having a franchise league of Test cricket separate to the ICC, where some rich person, Elon Musk, I don't know if I use him a lot. I'm not sure if Elon Musk is actually a cricket fan, despite being South African. But Elon Musk suddenly goes, do you know what? Yes, this is the second most lucrative cricket product. But that's still pretty lucrative. And actually, if you look at it from an advertiser's and a streaming platform, Test cricket is better than T20 cricket because you get the same people watching for 3, 4, 5 days in a row. It's a really targeted audience, all those sorts of things. It works really great. Move it into day night, have it streaming around the world, have your own streaming platform that allows people like us menace to actually pay for cricket no matter what country we're in. All those sorts of things. You could still make money off Test cricket. I think what's probably more likely now is that Test cricket goes into a more what first class cricket is, where it becomes a sort of almost a secondary competition, that you get players like, I don't know, Chris Rogers, who are complete specialists at Test cricket and are never going to play T20 cricket, and so they follow it. Everyone else filters into T20 cricket, and we're seeing the death of international cricket. And we talked about this in the film. Was that 2015? People like myself and Gideon Haig have been writing about this since 2008, 2009. It was always coming, and the boards had their chances of fixing it. They haven't. So the best chance of fixing Test cricket now is literally to go a similar kind of franchise/league model with some money from the outside. And then you go around the world and you offer a bunch of players who are average T20 players, but probably good first class players, the ability to play that. The problem with that is the international side of Test cricket probably dies, and it does become a franchise thing. And then because of the ownership structure, my guess is the Mumbai Indians probably end up with a Test team anyway. And so, it goes in a weird position. But
Mumbai v the Sydney is for the Ashes.
Yeah. So we had our chance, and there are still certainly models that could work for Test cricket. It's too profitable to die is the most important answer, right? That doesn't mean it won't die, though, because if no one's looking after it, it can just fade away until it's no longer profitable. And as I said, it becomes like first class cricket, where it doesn't really have a major purpose anymore.
Because if you look at the next Future Tours program, this to me was seeing the future. And, the Test cricket for all the other nations, apart from Australia, England, and India, has been rapidly diminished to the point where it's almost like they're just playing enough Test cricket to say they're playing Test cricket. Because if it was any less, well, they're not playing Test cricket anymore. And that's the next period. And then the Future Tours program after that, does it keep going? And then it's just Australia, India, and England playing Test cricket.
I thought this was the FTP where we would see a downgrade in the amount of days played in international cricket for two reasons. Not just because the IPL is getting bigger and all this sort of stuff, but that everyone else is realizing we're going to have to make the Big Bash slightly more important. And we've seen with South Africa, already working out, and the hundreds already worked that out. They didn't do that, Menez. And this is the thing at the moment. We have this dueling thing of there's still a lot of international cricket being played, but as you said, maybe Test cricket is not quite at the center of it before, but we're still playing way too much franchise cricket, and franchise cricket has a really good model. It works a lot better. The funny thing is you still see people make fun of international cricket. International cricket on a per game basis still completely outrates most franchise cricket, right? Even in India at times. What it doesn't do, though, is you can't play a game every night, right? You can't sell a proper TV model where you saturate a month or 2 months or 3 months or 7 months if you're American sport, right? And so...
But there's also the financial independence, though, as well. Like, I think now the boards are starting to realize, let's get our own cash cow, so we're not relying on everybody else.
Well, I mean, that's what it was. What we have noticed, though, is that the Big Bash is not a cash cow, right? Yep. He's not making a fortune. The only tournament we've seen so far that's made a fortune is the IPL. Here's a really fun fact for you. Major League Cricket just, I think they got 120 or $150 million in funding. Right, they haven't started yet. That's more money than the CPL has ever raised, as far as I can tell. Right, and probably more money than the Big Bash has spent as well.
I heard a Victorian, maybe Adam Crosswaite. I think it was him, was going over to the States to work over there. Like
he coached the winning minor league cricket team, the Seattle Thunderbolts. I've got the shirt behind. I think Crossy might have been involved in me being sent the shirt.
There you go.
What a niche shirt that is, a minor league cricket shirt. But yeah, so there is money over there, right? So far, the others haven't done it. So they all went to the T20 tournament as a cash cow, but they haven't worked out how to make it a cash cow, right? So that next step is, can they make it a cash cow, or does it basically come to the point where the Big Bash, the 100, and the Major League Cricket are probably the only 4 tournaments if you include the PSL in that, the only 4 tournaments that aren't IPL feeder leagues. Right. And they have enough that they can do it. Every other T20 league in the world is literally associated with the IPL one way or another. It's probably where we're going. But the 100 and the Big Bash and Major League Cricket and the PSL all need to make a lot more money for them to be what their boards want them to be. The only way to do that, from what I can tell, is less international cricket.
Well, I think it's slowly moving there, and I think the Big Bash is kind of a feeder league for the IPL as well.
It's a feeder league, but it's not
just
a feeder
unofficially.
League. No, but what I mean is it's not a feeder league in that the IPL can't own a franchise.
Yes,
They can't put their coaches in place, and they can't do it that way. Whereas all the other leagues, I mean, the CPL basically, it got 4 IPL owners involved in it. The Cricket South Africa, the entire league is set up for that. The new UAE one. So, even Major League, to a certain point, it's going to be like that. But Major League, because of American money, is a slightly different proposition to everything else, just because there's a lot of money in American sports, even for cricket, it turns out.
Yeah, and there's huge audience. I mean, my third biggest downloads are always the States. And
Same.
Well, it's usually the States and India are about the same. So, Jarrod, I could talk to you for hours, but we've gone over an hour. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but we're going to wrap this up with Can't Let It Go, which is my segment. It's that little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. I'll start it off because, look, I'm a big fan of Justin Lang, and I thought he got completely shafted by the players. And, every Monday I get further evidence of why he was just a godsend to the Australian team, because every Monday on SEN radio, there's a show called Gillian Goss, hosted by Adam Gilchrist and Tim Gossage. And every Monday morning, they get Gilly's mate JL on for a segment called JL's Monday Motivation. So I have to listen to this every Monday. It's how I start my week. I'll give you an example of some of the gold bits of wisdom, like the pearlers, the insights. And let me bring in James for this. Hey, muggers.
Hello.
Welcome back. Sorry, I forgot about you, but that's not not easy, not hard to do.
Yeah,
so,
not easy. I was about to make that
the
joke.
intern's back, listeners. All right, so every Monday, JL provides this beautiful insight. So today this week it was, Jarrod, there's a powerful word called breathe, and you've got to remember to breathe in good and bad situations. I mean, start your week with that. It's gold, right? The next one was, the week before, was you can be a great performer and a great person, that you don't have to be a prick to be successful. Jarrod, again, what do you think? Can you imagine like Pat Cummins and all the Aussie boys around breakfast, they've just played a test match and JL wanders in on a Monday and he goes, don't forget you can be a great person and a great performer.
When you've read that many self-help books as he has, and you become like literally like a Facebook generator of it. I mean, I talked to players who were just like, you asked him a question and you would literally, it was like opening a fortune cookie. So he's the fortune cookie of Australian cricket.
Yes. And the week before that was, he said spring cleaning is a great feeling. And he was talking about, how he hosed his, driveway and he lay on it and it was very calming. And then he said,
he laid on his driveway.
Yeah. After it had been, pressure hosed. And then he said, and his advice that there was, you got to keep moving forward even in the tough times. So like if you like podcasts, go and find Gillian Goss and download JL's Monday Motivation, because it is the best way to start the week. That's my Can't Let It Go.
It sounds extraordinary, and I hope that I never accidentally listen to it.
I'm going to send it to you every time now. Jarrod, what's your Can't Let It Go?
So my Can't Let It Go goes back to the Deepti Sharma, Charlie Dean run out.
Yes.
It's not about the run out itself. It's about something that I haven't seen anyone else talk about, but maybe they have, because I tried to not follow the news on that, because as you said, it was just a lot of pious English people and a lot of angry Indian people. And I was just like, it's a run out, everyone. These happen. But the thing that I thought was really interesting, I think the Telegraph did a 2-page spread on it, right, in the UK. Think about it this way. A lot of really interesting stuff has happened in women's cricket before. So one of the first tactical retirements in T20 game was in women's cricket. No one noticed, right? Lots of really the first World Cup was in the women's game, and we still don't talk about that being the first cricket World Cup. Now we have a situation where someone gets run out legally, and it dominates cricket news around the world for 2-3 days. How far has women's cricket come that we now moan about it the same way we do about the men's game? And I think that's a huge, yes, it's all annoying. And we wish a lot of people on both sides, there's a lot of nonsense from both sides on this coming out. But from a perspective of women's cricket, every time something like this happens in women's cricket and we talk about it for days, I just kind of smile and remember back to when I started, and every time I'd write about women's cricket, someone would go, "It's never going to be popular. I don't know why you're talking about it." It's like, turns out, if you actually pay the women and they get better at the game and we start to broadcast it and we support them, turns out we do care enough to at least complain about it to our friends on Facebook.
It's a great point, actually. I mean, years ago that would have just happened. No one would have seen it. It would have been
Wouldn't
not
have been
televised.
filmed.
No, it wouldn't have been filmed. No one would have written about it. So yeah, a great point, actually. Muggers, you got now. This is Muggers' first ever Can't Let It Go. Bring it to us, Muggers. He's been.
You can't put the pressure on me like that, but I'm going to deliver anyway.
Here we go.
So you guys raised keepers and talked about them at length. Alex Carey and Josh Inglis, and I'm going to throw another one at you. Josh Felipe.
What as an opener?
So I'm just talking. I'll give you the stats first. So he's averaged over 30 in the past 4 seasons of BBL. He was the player of the tournament in BBL 10, and he was the 3rd leading run scorer in the last BBL, and he's only played 10 matches of international cricket for Australia in the T20 scene. So what I'm saying is he becoming a wasted talent because Australia just listed the best under 25 cricketers over the past week, and Cameron Green was involved, but Josh Philippe was also there at the age of 25. So what I'm saying is he wasted, and should he be selected in the team purely for his Australian form in the BBL?
Well, I think the selectors think he's 15 because that's how he looks. So they probably think he's got plenty of time.
Okay.
But he doesn't. What do you think, Jarrod? Where are you a Philippi fan?
Yeah, massive fan. I think a really interesting thing happened with him. He was batting. I can't remember what year I was covering the Big Bash, but he was batting down the order. And I think I wrote an article about him that year going, the absolute best thing that Australian cricket can do is tell his franchise not to move him up the order. Because the same thing happened with Ashton Turner. Where he could have been the world's best number 5. They moved him up the order and he just got lost where everyone else is batting, right? He ends up as a number 3 and didn't quite make it. We have the ability to actually make the most out of him. And I think when he went up the order, he gets lost in the sea of everyone doing well up the order in the Big Bash, right? But yes, I'm a big fan. Especially in T20 cricket, I never really got the point of Alex Carey batting in the middle order when he came into the T20 team, because he was an opener who batted slow. Why would you want him to come in the middle order? I know he's done brilliantly in one-day cricket compared to his T20 stuff, certainly. But yeah, I'm a big fan of both the Joshes. I think they're both incredible talents. I think the problem was, didn't he go to the IPL? Did he play for Mumbai? I think it was Mumbai, and didn't make any. He really needs, and we saw Inglis
was it RCB? I think you went to RCB.
Was it RCB? Yeah, you might be right. And then we saw Inglis go and play in county cricket and star. Of the two, I would be following that Josh method, not the other Josh method, if that makes sense. He needs to play a little bit more franchise cricket. I wouldn't worry too much about him being a wasted talent because he's 25. And because what's Carey, 31, 32. So, it's not quite the Haddon Gilchrist situation, but you're right. I think he's a phenomenal player, but I would certainly like to see him. I'd like to see both of them playing down the order, because that's what you need to generate. And I think, rather than hoping someone like Matthew Wade or Marcus Stoinis can work it out, you'd be better off to actually find people who are just already doing it right.
Yeah, the T20 Blast is a bit of a sneaky way of getting yourself into T20 teams. They play so many games there. Like Chris Lynn did it, Inglis did it. You go and have a good blast, and like there's 14 games. If you just have 3 good games, everyone thinks you've had a great tournament, because that's what they see.
Yeah, I think all those, and it's also that if you do play the 14 games, I know I've talked to a couple of players who are just like, it's worth getting into the Blast just because you play more games than you do in some of these other tournaments. And they're also, it's spread out a little bit more, right? So if you play 10 games in the CPL and your first 3 games, you smash it, and your last 4 games, you fail, like that's what everyone remembers. In the Blast, it's so spread out that individual games are kind of remembered a little bit more. And if you have played one good game in the Blast, it gets a lot of coverage around the world. And if you fail a bunch, no one cares because it doesn't go anywhere. So it's a really, really interesting tournament from that perspective. Also, from a batting perspective, people smack the crap out of the ball in that league. They literally come in. They can only hit right arm seam, but they all just tee off against the right arm seam. So it's a good place to go and have the freedom to play on slightly smaller boundaries, and just have a good swing. So it's a good tournament to go in where it's low pressure, but you learn a lot. And I do think that, I don't know if this has been a tactic or not, but I think over the last couple of years, Australia hasn't pushed enough of their players out to franchise cricket. I don't think Dan Christian is the player he becomes if he hadn't played in so many different places. And I think that we need to get to a point where, I mean, we talked about the Josh Hazlewood. He had to play Big Bash and IPL to get to the level he's at. These things don't happen by accident because you can't play enough international cricket for Australia to be able to get the same skills that you can. You can literally go, Blast CPL or 100 CPL and play more than you're ever going to play for Australia. So we've got to actually start to get those guys into those leagues rather than saying, oh, we want to hold everyone back.
More NOCs. That's what. Well, Jarrod, thank you so much for coming on Cricket Unfiltered. Everyone, you can find Jarrod on Twitter.
Everywhere.
Yeah, find everywhere. He's got a YouTube channel, got podcasts. So, Jarrod, thank you very much for giving us some of your time and expertise on Cricket Unfiltered.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
Marcus, thanks for turning up. You're doing a brilliant job as the intern. So, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening, Jarrod. I think Paul's still away next week, so I think Jaleesa is going to come into studio, but we'll be back then. Enjoy the cricket.